This is the EnT podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Scoodic, in the traditional and unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy people. Well, hey there, one and all. Hey there, everyone, wherever you happen to be out there. I am Matt Stranick. This is Dr. Doug Reed, and we are super stoked, grateful, and pleased to be here with you for episode 99, the last of the double digits of the EdNonTech episode, of the EdNonTech podcast, rather. It's been a few weeks since the last time we've actually recorded one of these due to personal and various other factors. And glad to be back at it. Second last episode of season 4 as far as it goes. And so we're just really powering forward towards a milestone of sorts with episode 100 before the end of the month, and as well with a no doubt scintillating, I tell you what, discussion and exploration and indeed potentially pedagogical investigation of the virtues and or what challenges perhaps even associated with some really hard tech in the ed tech realm, this being the EdNonTech podcast. Of course, we're doing an episode about student response systems, SSRs, aka clickers. But before we dive headlong into this, wanted just to say, Doug, how's it going? And it's good to see you, my friend.
Thanks. It's going really well. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm so happy that you're cool with my mea culpa on clickers. Because I've been kind of making fun of clickers now for about 98 episodes. So I figured, let's actually engage with the concept. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. But for me, it was just always that cheap, easy shot I could take. So now I wanted to actually dig into the concept.
Well, fantastic, Doug. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. And how's life in New Brunswick?
Yeah, out here in Charcoal, Charlotte County, New Brunswick. It's pretty nice. The springtime is well upon us. We had an absolutely glorious, sunshiny kind of day yesterday. Today, kind of gray and more like the April showers bringing May flowers kind of thing. But yeah, on the whole, I'm on, what do you call it? The first rung of a new sort of professional area. I am a legal beagle, a legal assistant, and that's an interesting thing. What it lacks in monetary compensation, it certainly makes up for with new challenges. You want to talk about learning something new every single time you go into work? Well, boy, oh boy, I spend all my time with lawyers lately. And in fact, as far as it goes, I date a lawyer and I live in a house which has a lawyer's office in it. So that's not what I necessarily had on my 2026 bingo card. If you asked me back in December how I thought things would be going, but yeah, on the whole, it's really interesting and it's easy to stay motivated and engaged in such circumstances. Appreciate you asking, my friend. What's the things going on with Prince Edward Island and thereabouts?
Oh, as soon as we finish this recording, I head out to the garden and I pull out the trellises that I left all winter.
The trellises, you say?
Yeah, I have a couple of trellises. I have 4 2 of them I took out in the fall. 2 of them I'm going to take out. I have like those crazy hoop trellises so that like pumpkins grow up and then hang down and you can just pull them right off the vine and stuff. Because I can't help myself. I am going to try to be creative. That has been a mark of my life. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it scratches that itch. So that's my plan. I can actually see my entire garden now. There's no snow left, so it's time to dig into the next step.
You're planning on planting. You're an avid gardener. Does Aaron join you on these endeavors as well from time to time, or is this more your thing?
We share it depending on who's got the time in their schedule for whatever's going on. She has more knowledge. I am the learner. So I'll go to her and say, what's going on here? Can you help me with? And then she'll explain it, and then I'll go do the thing. And then I learn. Because right now I thought I had 36 tomato plants starting to grow. And in fact, I have closer to 80. So yeah, I'm a genius. I'm a genius. And they can't go into the garden for like 2 months or at least a month and a half. So I don't know where they're all going to fit. Like every window in my house has got little tomato plants, but that'll work nice in the fall and in the late summer when I'm picking them and eating them and stuff. So we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. From window pots and boxes to garden to stomach.
Yeah.
The grand cycle of food growing in Atlantic Canada in one's home. That's awesome, and Doug.
I'm just so shocked because I never thought I had taste buds, right? Like there's a whole process. Like the larger your nasal cavities, the more air goes through, so the more you taste food. That's kind of why people can taste more or less than other people.
Whoa.
And I've had store-bought tomatoes my whole life, and now that I've started to eat tomatoes that I've grown, it's like, oh my God, we got ripped off. Like these have taste. These are really good. Like, what's going on? I thought tomatoes were those red mushy things you ate because they were good for you. And instead, no, like they're actually...
Or you get them occasionally sliced thinly on a hamburger, right? Buried underneath the other condiments.
Exactly. That's exactly what my experience was. And now I'm growing as a person.
Well, that's outstanding, Doug. Glad to hear it. And so then, if we may, take a lateral step up or down the lattices, as it were, up and down the trellises, scaffolding this very episode, trying to make the continuity here, folks. If you wanted to maybe just tell us a little bit about why on earth you thought it would be helpful beyond just given the short shrift, perhaps historically, to the SSRs. I have to wonder, Doug, have you used these tools ever in your practice as a teacher? Have you more or less just observed it or read about it and sort of had a de facto critical stance on it? What was informing your thought process here and making this the topic of episode 99, my friend?
What I came up with is I've supported a lot of teachers, right? But in my various roles, I've helped other educators get better at what they're doing, right? I'm the troubleshooter to come in and say, oh, maybe try this instead of doing that.
Absolutely.
Because I've been doing this for a while.
Yep.
And the last time I was in a K-12 classroom, I used my phone a lot for things like Kahoot. So I use SRSs, the student response systems, but through apps. So I thought, oh yeah, there's a value there. I see it. I get it. And then a couple of episodes ago, we did the reducing screen time episode that we did, where Denmark and now Sweden and Finland are starting to say, nope, we're cutting that out. We're putting limits on it. I'm like, oh, so the app use for the student responses can't really happen. What's going to happen to that good interaction? And I'm like, No, they're going to have to go back to clickers potentially to save that interaction. And then it was like, okay, stop being a smart aleck. Let's go take a look at clickers really. So that's what we're doing. I saw the slide back from let's get to the actual core of what we're doing. It's like anything. In moderation, lots of stuff is good for you. But as soon as you're a fundamentalist about it, not so much. And
as far as it goes, I mean, taking a strong or stringent line against something or for something for that matter tends to be a good way of scoring political points and driving a narrative by
yes,
people who might be, for instance, in a role that only lasts, say, an election cycle or two, or long enough to justify a budgetary expenditure. It all sort of is part and parcel of a wider narrative, and nuance doesn't always really go well with such framing, I suppose.
yeah, and I was too extreme in my viewpoints, so that's why I went back and examined my thoughts. It's like I've just started to do reading some literature on drinking coffee, because I was never a coffee drinker because caffeine is bad, right? Like it was that simple. It was that black or white. That is not the case, right? I have opened my eyes. I've kept the open mind, and now the current literature seems to be 2 small cups of coffee are actually really healthy for you every day. So that's great. But to take it to an extreme, right? If I had 25 cups of coffee, that's less good for me. The bad outweighs the good at that point, which is along the lines of what some of these countries are doing with limiting screen time, trying to push back against big ed tech. So looking at the clickers, there is value. These student response systems have a value, but we just went way too far with the mobile devices. So if we can reel it back and just keep the core good value, then that's a win. If that helps students and that makes it better for educators as well, fantastic. That is a win.
The underpinning value of, I dare say, digital pedagogies is not to be diminished, certainly not by the likes of us, despite our perhaps somewhat ironic kind of framing for this ed non-tech enterprise. So, if I may, Doug, it seems like that might be a way into. I think it's very interesting here. This first reference in your list is a publication by Marasco from 2025, but the part of it you punched out here into our document is sort of a throwback in the Wayback Machine to the 1960s. Why don't you tell us what you were thinking of including this one, pal?
So for long-term listeners, what I do, you already know. The long-term people already know. I like to go back in history to find the placement. And I couldn't find any clickers or student response systems literature that really worked for what I was trying to say. But this Marasco 2025 article was awesome. It did the history for me. And I'm like, okay, let's go back and look. Let's see. And they said in the 1960s, there's an institution called Foothill where they had a lecture theater where students as a class could give immediate feedback to instructors via buttons at their seats. So it's just a little keypad thing with a couple of buttons. And it was a forerunner to the modern clicker systems. So that was there, and oh boy, isn't this great? Isn't this whatever? We're the space age. Look what we did. But then the author went back and looked 50 years, 60 years back, and the answer was not a single staff member used it. None of them had used it to teach. So it was one of those flash in the pan things. Hey, isn't this cool? And it's like the world was not ready. And it was just, when the world's not ready, the world's not ready. It doesn't matter how great your idea is. It's just not ready. So that'd be like taking a mobile phone back 300 years. The world wasn't ready. The infrastructure wasn't set up. The culture wasn't there. So forget it. That's life. So that's why I wanted to go back. They had something. It was great. There was all kinds of optimism in the 60s, especially with all the space race stuff. And when they say, sadly, I think the answer is no. Despite a plea to our Retirees Association, could not find a faculty member who used it to teach. So there might have been somebody, but nobody heard of anybody. So the whiz bang was very whizzy bangy with this one. This is the earliest one I could find, was the 1960s. So,
Well, outstanding. And there's a few things that you kind of put out there in framing it, which I definitely appreciate here. I guess the first of which is your usage of that term, the space age. I just think, man, what a example of a future forward kind of term, but it's also somewhat of an anachronism, right? Wherein the age of space exploration, putting people on the moon back in the late 60s, right? Where the American astronauts put their feet on the surface of the moon, assuming you think that it actually happened, which I think most sensible people do. But I guess that kind of put me in mind. Before I ask you, Doug, if you were following the Artemis 2 space exploration, where we got photographs of the dark side of the moon for the first time. I find that kind of surprising with all of our contemporary satellite technology and everything else. It's the first time we've actually documented that. It's the first most significant space exploration involving the moon and humans in a couple of generations since the space age. Again, I kind of have to think just that there is somewhat of a cognitive dissonance where we think about the, what do you call it, kind of optimism which underpins the notion of the space age, in as much as that really was on the other side of it, the space race, which I think you referred to as being indicative of like the Cold War between the West and the former Soviet Union, right? And the threat of nuclear holocaust, which was sort of an existential aspect of people's lives, right? Growing up in that period up until around 1990.
oh
What are we
yeah.
looking at there?
So I want to start the space age with Sputnik, and I might just happen to have a picture of Sputnik up on the wall that I'm now
Oh my gosh. You never cease to impress, my friend.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that. So I think it started like late 50s into the 1960s. Anyway, I just love the concepts of it. And yeah, you're right. Like it wasn't just a time of optimism. It was also the space race. It was also the Cold War. It was all those other things. And I really enjoyed your comments there, because I did not expect to walk away to pull that off the wall. I'll put that back up after we finish recording. And yeah, what was it? 1989, before or whenever the Berlin Wall really came down.
Yeah.
Even though it's been down longer now than it was ever up, but that was just formative for my life. That was just something that was going on most of my childhood.
Did you follow the Artemis 2 cycle in the news particularly, or did it not really resonate for you?
I was shocked. I had a conversation with my wife where I'm like, wow, like nobody seems to care about this Artemis 2 thing. And she's like, what are you talking about? She goes, it's all through CBC and it's all through the BBC. And I realized that because of what's been going on in the world, I have pulled back from all the news sites. And everything I've been getting has been through whatever algorithms. None of the algorithms had sent me anything on the Artemis 2 mission. And as soon as my wife said that, I went to CBC and bang, it's there. It's everywhere. It's fantastic. And it's like, okay,
One of the astronauts aboard that mission was a Canadian person, right? So
yes.
it's kind of a cool thing, right?
Oh,
And
yeah. It was awesome.
yeah, and just I guess to tie it back somewhat to this article that you've got here from Marasco, just the fact that this appeared in the Physics Teacher, right, publication. I just think physics is kind of the basis for engineering. Engineering's kind of, in a lot of senses, the basis for what makes such exploration possible. And so, again, your survey of the literature for the purposes of this episode kind of ends up taking us on places where we wouldn't necessarily have expected to go otherwise, right? From its origin point to where we end up having a conversation. It's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, once I started going back to the Canadian Broadcast Corporation and watching the feeds and being up to date, yeah, I went full nerd into knowing all the things, knowing all the stuff. So it was really neat. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I was a little nervous when they came back into the atmosphere and the parachutes were out and all that stuff. So, but I just thought it was wonderful. It was such a positive, hey, we can still do these things. Let's keep moving forward.
Even though it's a cesspool out there in so many ways, there are these bright spots of cooperation and, I dare say, optimism, right? So,
well, the shocking thing for me was I saw a little clip of Rick Mercer, the Canadian comedian, and he was a guy that was always into Canadian politics, right? He talked about that a lot, and he said he's pulled back from the news. He can't watch the news anymore because of the state of affairs. So it was like, wow, if he's saying no, how bad is it? And it's like, well, pretty darn bad.
Somebody whose mug was sort of synonymous with this hour as 22 minutes and the Mercer Report and various of these.
Yeah.
Somebody who, in his own way, lived and breathed Canadian politics, just having to step back. That is rather significant. And if you're either too young or not Canadian enough, or possibly both, to be aware of Rick Mercer, do yourself a favor and Google yourself some YouTube clips. That may actually add some joy to your day, because I think the presentation and the humor belies your need to know anything about Canadian politics whatsoever. Rick, if you want to be a guest on the show at any point ever, we'd be delighted. Bazinga.
Yes. And on that note, I'm going to go jump to the next article. Catella and Joosten, 2007, Student Response Systems in the Research Bulletin. And what I liked is they have their quote is, one common way in which clicker systems are used in classrooms is to stimulate classroom discussions. Another way in which clickers are used to assess students' comprehension of course materials through low stakes quizzing. I'm a big fan of low stakes.
100%.
Because if it's high stakes, people get stressed out or anxious and they don't do as well. When it's low stakes, oh, okay. It's like when I do my woodworking. If I mess it up, okay, I just made a piece of firewood. Let's go burn it. The world's not coming to an end. But I have some high stakes pieces of wood in my garage, right? I have some walnut and some maple and some oak that I desperately do not want to screw up. That's why they're still there. I don't have the guts to use them yet. But I love the concept. And one thing I did is I did some screen captures from some of their findings. And the difference between faculty opinions of things and student opinions of things was shocking. I was shocked at, like, for the faculty, clickers allowed me to assess student knowledge on a particular concept. 100% of the faculty members said that. Like, it's like, seriously? You're going to use a clicker to make that decision? What are your controls? Right? Is it the kid leaning over to the other kid saying, which one did you press? A? Oh, what did you press? You pressed A? Okay, I'll press A. I don't believe that's true. I do not believe that works. I don't think assessing student knowledge on a particular sub-concept can be done by click the button. It scares me that 100% of the people said, oh, yeah, for sure.
Percent of anything does speak to possible methodology issues, I want to say, even though I am rather partial to these graphs. One thing that kind of puts me in mind just from your kind of concept there, the way you described it, is sometimes whether it's through the authors of the study or whether it's the teachers who were involved or even just ourselves among the educator and even, I suppose, non-educator community, is sometimes the difference is a bit lost between the notion of assessment versus evaluation, right? My understanding of evaluation sort of being something for a grade and something that's maybe more formalized and something that's quantified in terms of an academic record. I do tend to think of assessment as being a bit more amorphous, as being something maybe a little bit more free floating. And so low stakes quizzing, like, okay, well, sure, if you don't have a mark attached to it. I haven't used response systems like at all, but in terms of how they're kind of deployed, I mean, I've used, for instance, Google apps in the classroom. And so having a Google quiz and having students kind of dial into it just to kind of answer some questions to test understanding, just to see, like, what did you like about this or what did you take away from this? That's something that I've encountered before, that I've used before in my practice. I think of that as maybe being a bit distinct from the kind of thing that we're talking about here, but not mutually exclusive either. So,
to me, I could do the same thing in an analog fashion by saying, okay, all students, close your eyes. Everybody that knows this or asks them a specific question, if you know the answer to that, put your hand up. And it's the analog version. Oh, how many hands are up? Okay, they must know it.
But there's less dopamine involved. Meet them where they live, right? We got the clickable generation. We got you like things on electronically devices mediated, right? So dopamine plus education, right? That might be a topic for another show. Dopamine plus education.
Oh, okay. I got to write that down. I really like that.
Dopaminification of education, as it were. Somebody should tell one of these people that writes at a high level about e-learning that's the next hot trend. Anyway, I digress, but
it's so to get back to these charts, though, I enjoyed your digression very much.
Thank you. I do what I can.
To get back to the charts, when you have these same faculty members saying things like, oh, clickers helped increase my students' overall performance in the class, and 6% of the educators said, no, that's not the case, but 27% of the students said, yeah, that's not the case. You see the huge difference in the perspectives there, which scares me that they're that off base. Right? If I had 27% of my students not getting something or not agreeing with me, I would be very, very nervous having any confidence in what I was doing. Can you imagine if 27% of the people at a concert just didn't follow the rules, whatever the rules happened to be, right? It's like, oh yeah, let's all start smoking in the opera theater. I don't know. Right. I'm pretty sure the 73% would say, what the heck is going on here? You can't do that. So, yeah, those numbers are just wacky to me. And they present them so proudly, like, yep, this is what we're doing. This is a good sign. So it has to go further. I don't think the faculty members have used the depth of thought needed to actually help the students the way they could. I think it's a good start. It's absolutely a good start in the right direction, but
Well, and in capturing such findings and presenting them in this kind of manner, it does show opportunities for not just further study, but enhancements to professional practice among the instructor cohort, which I think that's a win situation, right?
yeah, this would help identify, okay, we got a situation here. Let's do a session on this, or let's bring in some experts to help with these key bits. I think it'd be a great place to start. I like identifying the issues because when they're invisible, you just don't know. But when it's like, whoa, we got to deal with that, that's always a good sign. And that's what research is for. I think, in my humble opinion, I see research as a way to make things better, to help us move forward somehow.
Yeah, and I guess to the extent that we are kind of winding the discussion on this article down on faculty development of a sort, or sort of the divide between educator and student perceptions, right? Somewhat. I think that actually puts us on a pretty good footing towards here with this Danielle and Wang from 2008 that you have, in as much as that sentence you kind of pulled out is speaking to a teacher-centered orientation. That phrase in that quote just kind of
Yeah.
jumps out at me. Maybe you want to enlighten us a bit on what compelled you to pull that one here, Doug.
A big reason is the Journal of Educational Technology Development and Exchange. I've been around for a long time. I'd never heard of that journal, ever. Ever. So it's like, let's take a look. Let's see what we got, right? Because I didn't know what development and exchange meant, right? Like, it's just a really weird phraseology for what I'm used to. So
Right.
that was enough. That's like when you have a thread that's sticking out of your shirt or out of your sweater or something. You just pull at it. It what attracts your attention. You just keep pulling.
Well, and for those playing along at home, I just Googled it now. Just Googled it now. It originates from the University of Southern Mississippi. So there we go. If you think of the Mississippi as being the deep south, then this is the deep, deep south, right? The southern part of a southernmost, they're on the Gulf of Mexico. So, not that that's got neither here to there, but it does maybe speak to a bit of our, what, Northern Atlantic Canadian educator lack of awareness on it, perhaps. Anyway, speaking to things that we perhaps have thus far not encountered.
And the authors here, Dangle and Wang, came up with a really great quote. Like, such guidance may be helpful, but comes from a teacher-centered orientation and does little to address pedagogical issues. And just introducing new technologies does not address the pedagogical issues of how to improve student learning. And I was like,
That could apply
wow.
to so many interventions that we've spoken to on this show and have yet to speak to on this show. That's a really good quote there, Doug.
That was, oh, yeah, that was so fantastic. I saw that and said, yeah, this is a winner. They cut right to the point. And I definitely could not have written that, because between the comma and the and, they're just throwing too much stuff into one sentence. I would have broke that up into two sentences, but the way they did it is just a work of art. It's just so nice, and it just gets right to the point that I've been dancing around for 99 episodes now. So it was just really nice. I thought it was a good wrap up, because it's, I'm student centered. And sometimes that drives me nuts. Right? It's, how come you don't understand this? What's going on? I've taught it 9 ways. How do you still not get it? So there have been times I have been frustrated. I've had frustrations with that, but I come from a student-centered focus. So to see EdTech pushing the teacher-centered focus like this, I'm glad they called it out the way they did. And they called it out 18 years ago.
If in 2008, as we're kind of moving towards episode 100, and I was just preparing my notes for episode 100 in advance of this 99th episode, because I feel like being maybe a little bit ahead on my homework for a change for the show. But 2008, just for me, that is a bit of a milestone, just in as much as that was the first year that I began as a B.Ed teacher. That was the year that I graduated from STU, St. Thomas University here in New Brunswick, with my B.Ed. It was the year that I went to Qatar for what was going to end up being 6.5 years. And so you're saying, yeah, that was 18 years ago. That was quite a while ago. I'm like, yeah. But in the other sense, for me, I'm like, wow, that was just, I blinked and almost 2 decades went past, right? So,
yeah, and I've got about 10 years on you.
right.
So,
well, you started earlier as well. You kind of were on the path to being an educator, because as longtime viewers and or listeners of the show may know, Doug is not just an educator's educator. He's an educator's educator from a family of educators, if you can imagine such a thing, going back to parents and indeed grandparents with you.
yeah.
Is that the case, Doug?
Parent and my grandfather and aunts and uncles. Yeah, there's a bunch of us.
Some families have police officers. Some families have people who get involved in business or an entrepreneurial enterprise or trades of various kinds. You come from a family of teachers, and I am enduringly grateful to have that perspective informing both the show and my perspective as an educator and a human that I have, such as it is.
So I want to jump to the next article, Research Trends in Student Response Systems by Al-Jalloud, Gromick, Billingsley, and Kwan. And this is a 2015 article. And what they did really nicely is they did something with the naming conventions. And one of the things I have harped on since at least episode 2 is we need to name things clearly. And what they did is they looked at all the different terms at the time, like classroom performance systems, audience response systems, personal response systems, classroom communication systems, electronic response systems, electronic voting systems, polling systems, clicker systems. So there's all kinds of stuff that they've looked at, and they put it in one nice list. And I know that I have just used the term clicker derogatorily for 4 seasons now. But it's a far richer group than that. So if you ever see a CPS, an ARS, ERS, EVS, all of those abbreviations, all of those abbreviations are basically talking about the same thing. It's how do we use technology to get info from the students to see how they're doing and to give them input and to open up the pedagogical opportunities. So that's me coming from my student-centered approach again. But I just really appreciated how Al-Jalloud et al. Listed them all. And they didn't just list them all, they went into details. Like they had, these are all heading titles, and they had info about them all, which I thought was really nice. And some of it was like pick and knit. It's like, yeah, those two things are basically the same, right? I don't see the big difference in a lot of these, which is why student response system kind of is the overarching term that covers it all. Or derogatorily, clickers cover it all.
As you were describing that approach here, I was going to almost get up from my seated area where I am and go over to the closet and get out my umbrella and then dramatically open my umbrella, not just because it's spring, but as a non too subtle physical visual metaphor for the clickers as umbrella terminology here. So well done. Very apropos here, Doug.
Well, I'm disappointed now. I got my picture of Sputnik. Where is this umbrella I've been promised?
Well, for those who are watching this at home on the YouTube or whatever visual, I am not just sitting as a disembodied waveform out in the algorithm, although we do exist in that manner, but rather I am in a spare room slash office environment, and I'd have to remove myself at some distance and open a closet and hunt for something. If I guess probably I could have done a slightly better job of reviewing the notes in advance of our chat, but maybe next time we'll have an episode or some other next time, which involves physical props, and we can just spend the whole thing talking about props and physical visualization.
Oh, absolutely.
Just
And
spitballing here.
I was more poking fun than anything else. I wasn't trying to throw shade on anything because.
Oh no, I wouldn't expect otherwise. Really, my goodness.
And I didn't expect to go get a physical prop. I did have a physical prop I would wanted to have for episode 100, but that's not going to happen. So, but we've talked about.
Well, now I'm curious. I'm thinking balloons and party hats and streamers and confetti myself, but we'll see.
I found a website that will take that you can record your own LPs, your own vinyl records.
What?
And my thought was, if we could grab a bunch of clips of various bits that we liked in various episodes, we could have the Ed Nontek LP. And then I would want it to be gold, and then I would put it in a frame, and it would go like right here behind me.
And the thing about it too is that it would actually be playable,
and it would be playable because you can't see it, but there's a record player right behind me from the 1950s that was made in Montreal. The serial number is like 329. It only has 3 characters in the serial number. It was.
You can't tell here, folks, maybe, but I am literally vibrating with excitement at the possibility of having a vinyl rendering of some of these episodes or clips from some of these episodes. So that is going to bear some further development and or research and development. But gosh, before we get even further sidetracked.
Yeah, we could definitely get sidetracked. I've actually gone through and said, oh, I'd like these 2 minutes from this episode, and I'd like those 4 minutes from that episode. I started a list 2 years ago. I just haven't gone back and done more of it yet. But
I'm telling you, when the book starts taking a little bit more momentum during this hiatus, this might be, who knows? I mean, I've been saying, well, we're not going to self-publish, but maybe just to hell with it, we might, just for our own interest, and having a vinyl rendering to go with that, as we actually will send you a vinyl of this or a cassette if you're so inclined, right? That might be, who knows? Now I'm just kind of doing the, what do you call it, hamster wheel, thinking about some of this stuff. So that's not a bad place to be, I suppose.
No, not at all. And that's welcome to that's what I like about creative endeavors.
Quite right.
Right? If we had a producer in a sound booth, like, what are you guys doing? Get with the program. Get back on topic. But we don't. It's us.
This is a fully media independent and thus far non-monetized endeavor. we are trying to factor in some changes to some of that, folks.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, we could chip away at that. But okay,
okay,
get back on topic. Let's
please.
go to Henderson and Chalmers 2024.
Excellent.
Past, present, and future of clickers in the Education Sciences Journal. And they're quite positive. The use of clickers of modern pedagogies does not only bring administrative value, so because the admin value is there, but can also increase student learning. And they found evidence of about 7 different categories of student learning that it can help with. The challenges, though, include content and questions balance, because sometimes the questions are, what are we doing here? Like if you don't put a lot of thought into it beforehand, you're going to pay. There was a teacher at a school that I used to do professional development with, and he had they all had hockey jackets at this one school. Like, like those Letterman types of jackets, or it was kind of like leather in the front and the sleeves were whatever that other material is. And they all had their names on their shoulders and their positions. And his was winger because he winged it. Lesson plans really didn't happen. Everything was him winging it. So there were times, like even when I'm teaching, there's times when I have it all planned and then I'm like, oh, what do I do now? time to do the song and dance. Be quick on your feet, because sometimes things run short, or some things go crazy long, or whatever, right? Depending on
improvisation is not just the purview of jazz musicians or stand-up comedians. It's a fundamental aspect of the educational endeavor, and when students see you clearly making it up in the moment, it does give them, I like to think, agency to see that, as with all approaches, you can use that to some degree of legitimate inquiry and to some legitimate degree of success, and potentially then take that same mentality, the flexibility, the agility, the nimbleness of thought, and apply it into other areas outside the classroom setting, right? So,
and I see the teachable moment as part of that. Like I've had lessons that I've designed, and then the students really engage with one particular thing, and it's like, that's not really where we were headed, but they're learning, they're engaged, they're active. Let's go there. Let's see what's there to help. And then I'll try to tie it back in later.
Exactly so.
So there's other questions, other challenges, like question development time. Yeah, it takes time to build good questions. It just does. Student challenges using clickers in more traditional classrooms, because there's some classrooms that are some people are still in rows. Some people are still no group work, right? Those classes still exist. Clickers can be associated with the anxieties of testing, right? Some people have test anxiety. I get it. Manipulating attendance numbers. There's cases where clickers are used for attendance. And I'm talking in government organizations where they press a button to vote on whatever in some country I shall not name, because we've already talked enough about what's going on there this episode. And they had a case once I saw on video where it was one elected rep went around and clicked the attendances for all of these other people that weren't there. And suddenly 10, 15, 20 people that weren't there had voted the way this guy wanted them to vote. So yeah, that gets a little sketchy. Clickers can
add. It's a lot sketchy.
Yeah, it's a lot sketchy, but that's a drop in the bucket for sketchiness down there. Clickers can add to financial burdens, right? They cost money. So there is a divide there. And then one other thing is greater reticence to ask questions out loud. The students are like, well, why would I ask a question out loud when he's going to come up with a question for me? And I say he because I'm a male only, right? If the teacher's going to ask anyway, or the prof's going to ask anyway, why would I ask out loud? Right? Why can't I just hide in the background and be slightly anonymous? I completely get it. I completely understand. So I
And
like
just
these
on
challenges.
the other side of that, I am somebody who, at various points in my educational life, I think maybe more so in K to 12 rather than in university, but I was somebody who probably would have appreciated the opportunity to respond vis-a-vis some layer of anonymity or something other than verbalizing or
Yeah,
speaking. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily learned anything about speaking or positioning myself in front of other people, which is important. But at the same time, some people are shy. Some people have learning, neuro, or other kinds of diversities. It's, as you said at the very beginning of this, there's the positives and there's the negatives, and then sort of there's the gray sort of nuance area in between, right? And so, yeah, I like how we're kind of going out with this on a way which kind of gives credence to both, I suppose.
that's it. And it's my way to help being self-deprecating because I have poked a lot of fun at clickers over the last 99 episodes. So I wanted to give them a fair shift to say, yeah, there's also a lot of good things here. But it comes back to everything else in educational technology. How is it being used? And if we're not doing the support to help the educators use it well, what are we doing? And I'm pretty sure I've said, what are we doing so many times that
It's an interesting piece of the show where every time you say that, I go, yeah, right on. What are we doing? So I say, in terms of our lexicon, in terms of our vernacular, I have nothing to diminish it with.
and that's it for the articles that I have set up for this episode. And
Fantabulous, Doug.
what I do have is some digital clutter,
Right.
and it's a bunch of it's a weird mix this time. Nobody, no cartoonists really do cartoons about clickers. That's not really a thing. There's no Dilberts or Sherman Lagoons or Foxtrots about clickers. So I had other random stuff. Is there any of these images that you're going to have on the website that?
Well, they're all on the website, folks.
Yeah,
You got to know. So do yourself the solid visiting the website to check this out in the contextualizing WordPress post. But actually, Doug, I'm sitting here. If you're watching this on video, you may have noted me kind of hunching over and squinting a bit because I've actually magnified. I am magnifying right now in my Google browser, the Google document, where, Doug, there's this image placed of the hands of a student with what looks to be a analog kind of response system of some variety. It's a photograph, and I'm trying to read what it's saying on the digital display, but I can't quite squint enough, and I'm using a laptop, and I'm not successful in reading what it says in that display. But that image for me is pretty contemporary, pretty telling, even though the technology that's being portrayed looks, I don't know, from something out of the early to mid tens, thereabouts. So I don't know, unless you have something you wanted to sort of give me an insight into that one where I'm lacking insight. Otherwise, I just feel like it's a good, nifty, contemporary ish kind of image without probably being very contemporary as such.
I am so glad you picked that image because
Okay.
of all the images, that was the one that struck me the most. So the fact
Mm,
that that was the one, I looked at that And what I saw is a calculator from the early 1980s or late 1970s.
Okay.
I saw that, like that silvery kind of thing with the tiny, teeny, tiny little buttons. And it was like, it seems to be like one step removed from the calculator watch. You know, those
there we
watches where
go.
they used to have the little buttons? Because that's
Awesome.
about what the size of the buttons are. And so when I saw it, I saw something completely different. So I appreciate your perspective on that. But that is what it is. And most of the other examples of clickers don't have that many options. Sometimes it's like a little game controller and there's A, B, C, D. Those are your 4 choices. And this has about 24 buttons. So it could be very programmable or give students a wide variety of options. But I just really enjoyed it because it was more real. And then there's a 3-ring binder. I don't know how many students use 3-ring binders. If that's a thing.
It's enough of something that is, it looks like a commonplace image, but there's a few aspects of it which are kind of challenging if you try and imagine or consider what they consist of.
And honestly, this student wearing a bunny hug with a zipper, I'm not sure why bunny hugs need zippers, but that's beside the point. When you're married to somebody from Saskatchewan, they're not called hoodies or jumpers anymore. They're or sweatshirts. They're bunny hugs.
So many things I've learned on this episode thus far. That's got to be one of the more significant, as it turns out.
Right on.
Awesome.
So if you have nothing else, I have 3 more things. The word, question,
Please do.
and phrases of the podcast.
Great.
The word of the podcast is clickers, because we mentioned it a bunch of times.
Yep.
Question of the podcast starts with a statement. I've never done this before, but again, it's my mea culpa. We regularly make fun of clickers. And I'm throwing you in there because it would sound worse if I regularly make fun of clickers.
I am happy to accept complicity in the scorn, and I can't even specifically deny that I've explicitly English teacher here, and yet with that poorly constructed sentence, I have to admit it's probably my mea culpa as well.
So when do clickers actually help people learn? I know people that have used them that love them. So how are you doing it? What can you help us share with everybody else
Awesome.
to just to make it better? And phrases of the podcast, there was 3 that I came up with. 2 of them are yours. The usage of that term, the space age. I really like how you phrased that to give us context on where we were headed next. It was nice foreshadowing for what the next couple of minutes were going to be. I really enjoyed that. And then
Awesome.
Dopamine plus education equals dopification of education. I think that's abundantly clever. So, and then mine is, what are we doing? And I don't know how to put the intonation into it. I think English is lacking that way. It's like, do I need emojis or emoticons?
We need
umulets.
umulets. Do we need the Baltic languages with the various kind of accents kind of over them?
Yes.
Or the French with the accent grave, the accent aigu, yeah, definitely. I can hear it, and I think one thing with it is that everybody has, if not your voice, then the voice of somebody other than themselves, wondering profoundly, what are we doing here?
And that's it. And that's what I've got for Student Response Systems, episode 99.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed this chat. Wasn't sure where it was going to go. I wasn't sure necessarily where it even kind of fit in with our overall, ecosystem, our milieu, our wind up or wind down, however you care to think of it, going into episode 100. But now it's more than abundantly clear, and I'm grateful to have had this conversation, Doug.
Thanks. Me too. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of anything else, so I'm going to say bye for now. Take care, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye bye.
See yous all, one and all.